Hey photographers, according to your comments, many of you suspect that camera companies engage in all kinds of devious activities and deceptions. So I've invited Paul Chato, the host of Science Tech Stand Up, to join me today.
Hey, no, Martin, I want to correct you. It's yes? No longer Science Tech Stand Up. I've rebranded back to Peter Paul Chato, the Peter Paul Chato Show. So Science Tech Stand Up is just a segment in it, along with the Hackintosh Beat and PPC Omedy, which some people want to call PP Comedy.
There will still be Science
Tech. Science Tech Stand Up is now my news segment.
Ah. Oh, so you've actually created an umbrella brand like Alphabet.
Correct.
Okay.
I've created a channel onto myself.
Right. So one of the things that you're doing, among all of these sub-channels now, you're in the middle of a lifelong case study of Apple, and it's the computer company, not the fruit.
And the company we love to hate.
Yes, the apples we love to eat. It is one of the companies that gets most frequently accused of anti-consumer behavior. Things that annoy and frustrate us, like AntennaGate and BatteryGate. So, Paul, first question: is Bill Gates, the evil genius behind Microsoft Windows, really the source of all of our consumer product complaints and all of these gate problems?
Yes, Bill Gates invented the gate. He and George Soros are involved in every single conspiracy in the world.
Wow, that's good to know. I'm looking to you for authoritative advice. So
I'm a card-carrying QAnon member. I know every bit of truth in the world.
Just going to get.
I'm kidding. I'm not a member of QAnon at all.
I'm going to get myself into trouble associating with you now. But shall we start with BatteryGate? I mean, the way that I understood it was that Apple intentionally slowed the processor so that the new release of iOS wouldn't drain the battery as quickly. Well, couldn't they have anticipated the consumer backlash that was going to generate, the outrage that resulted?
So let me say right off the bat, people have misunderstood that particular event. And Apple was, I believe strongly, and I'm not joking here, they were not trying to be anti-consumer. So the way the software update worked was the new software update would check to see the amount of power that was available in your battery and the number of number of times you charged it. And if it wasn't up to scratch, then it would kick in the power management so you could still have a usable phone. So if they didn't just take a brand new old iPhone and then cripple it, the battery had to be in such a bad enough shape for the software actually to kick in this feature. The problem was that Apple didn't tell anybody.
So consumers didn't understand it because Apple didn't bother to tell them what they were doing. That was really the problem?
Correct. So the phone suddenly started slowing down. Yeah, I really think so. What Apple was doing was actually a good thing. The bad thing was they didn't tell anybody, and it was ripe for class action lawsuit.
Right. And I think that companies are waking up to these kinds of consumer issues. Things are changing. I mean, for a long time it seemed that batteries, just to stay with that topic for a second, that there was a specific proprietary battery for each model of camera. But now I think manufacturers are being a little more universal with their battery, and many now support USB-C power delivery, which enable third-party external batteries without complicated workarounds like dummy batteries. Are manufacturers changing their ways, do you think, in 2021?
Well, you have to also understand how large companies are siloed. You'll have the battery division, and they will have have to be profitable, right? So, and then there'll be the lens division, and then the shutter division, and each group has to be able to present some kind of value to the parent company. And one way to do that was to have a different battery for every single camera. But at some point, the people who were involved with just the camera part of it said, no, let's standardize on batteries. People forget these large companies have these profit centers that all are desperate to maintain their fiduciary responsibility to to the big brain head office.
To the shareholders.
That's why some of these decisions, yeah, shareholders, and that's why these decisions are made. People don't realize that.
But shouldn't there be like one person in charge who says, this was not a good plan, this was not a good idea? The battery division shouldn't be allowed to drive the camera division.
Well, again, it depends on how the companies are set up. You'll have a manager for each model of camera.
Right.
So I'm not entirely certain that each manager talks to each other.
Or that they actually try their products before they launch them. Which sometimes seems to be the case, yeah. But, so it's clear, and, just at the individual product level, within a line, that features are held back, that the entry-level camera has fewer features than the cameras up the line. And that's a strategy that I'm actually kind of okay with. I mean, that encourages you to buy, a better camera. But some companies, like Sony, for example, that with the a6300 really took a step forward, 4K video, 100 megabit data rate, but then Sony dropped the ball. They didn't move beyond that while all of their competitors were doing that. Was that just to protect their higher-end prosumer pro cameras? Were they afraid that the pro people were going to buy the 6300 or cameras like it?
Well, Sony was in a very weird spot when they came out with the 6300. I don't think they were thought of as a consumer camera company or a professional single-lens reflex company at the time. They bought Minolta, so they'd have some kind of bayonet lens mount that they could adopt. I don't even know if they're still using that. The F mount, is that a relic of the Minolta purchase?
Even the A mount is gone. The only mount Sony seems to be concerned about at all is E mount these days.
E mount, not F mount. I just left a little part off the E there for the F.
Alphabetical.
So, no, it's crazy. So Sony did not have a reputation for making, quote unquote, real cameras back in the days of the 6300. That was the beginning of their long march. And look how far they've come now in terms of overcoming that experience. So the 6300 was part of like a whole line of like the 6400 and the 6500. I think what's happened now
before they went full frame. But by the time they went full frame, shouldn't the bandwidth the bit rate have increased? Shouldn't the bit depth have increased? Shouldn't the color subsampling have increased when all of their competitors were doing it?
Well, they were having heating problems with the 6300, weren't they?
Managed to fix those too. Even on the 6300. No, actually, this is something that's worth talking about, which is that these days, if there had been a model that overheated, they would find a way to fix the problem, and they would release the next model that didn't overheat or overheated less. But now it seems that firmware gets released which addresses the issue. Sony did that with the 6300. They added a feature that would allow the temperature to go higher. In fact, Fuji just added this feature as a firmware upgrade. Are firmware upgrades really changing the way that camera companies develop their products? The same physical product stays in the market longer because they increase the capability of the firmware. So you don't have to upgrade camera bodies to get new features. You actually get them in the firmware release.
Well, I think that provides a loyalty factor. My G9, which I'm recording on right now, has had some phenomenally great firmware updates that made me continue to love this camera. And it continued to make it useful, and it also provided a sense of loyalty and goodwill from me to Panasonic.
Right, but is that
if they're willing to support my camera and improve it, then that's why I really like Panasonic.
Right, but that does not add a lot of value to their bottom line. They don't even charge for the firmware upgrades anymore.
Well, look at the recent firmware updates that Canon has provided for the R5, is it? or some series of camera that's now improved it enormously.
Right.
So yes, you're right. Everybody is doing that, but maybe everyone's expecting that now. Right. The one thing that makes the firmware updates, puts it into the suspect category, is that are camera companies, now that the cameras are becoming more and more digital and less mechanical, are they chopping out features just through software, and they're manipulating us?
Right.
Just through, this model is cheaper just because they arbitrarily turned off a bunch of features that it's completely capable of having, and then they give those features to the next model up and forcing us to pay more.
Right.
That then
like
now
when it's
that's
clearly
becoming
just a firmware
sneaky.
chop, then that really feels egregious to me. But sometimes it feels like it is related to, the processor speed or some other component in the camera that's just not capable of doing what that feature requires. I understand that there's a balance there. But yeah, when a firmware feature is just cut off, that feels like, wow, you just didn't get it.
Well, it's going to, that's going to get worse, because now that cameras are moving towards getting rid of the shutter, or the mechanical shutter, and are just going to be a chip on a circuit board, but the only way they're going to be able to differentiate them is maybe, weatherproofing or size or something. But there'll be less differentiation. Yeah, sure. All that stuff is, or maybe they'll have in-body stabilization and they'll just turn it off for the lower models, right?
Right. Oh,
that's where we're heading.
Right. That the stabilization is actually there in the chip, but it's disabled for you.
Correct.
And then you could pay $100 and get it enabled?
That's correct. That's where we're heading.
Well, but so I think Panasonic's the only company that's done that, where if you want the log feature recording, then you need to pay for this very complicated, convoluted little thing that allows
I paid the $100
feature. Yeah,
I paid the $100.
Yeah. Particularly when they don't send the review camera with that already enabled. That felt like, what's the,
Yeah, but the S1H has it included, and maybe they'll include it in the GH6.
Well, okay.
Who knows?
Yeah.
These are all corporate decisions.
Right. But sometimes, it seems as if the product team hasn't even bothered to try a feature. Like, features are included that really don't end up working. My son calls this, you had one job. So, for instance, Panasonic's post-focus feature, and I don't want to hit on Panasonic, but
we're really hammering Panasonic hard.
I don't intend to. Well, then let's talk about the high-res pixel shift thing, which a bunch of people do.
Yeah.
And again, it feels like a completely unusable feature. And then even when you can find the situation, you've got the tripod, you've got nothing moving in the scene, et cetera, everything that you need to do to make the feature work, the value doesn't seem to be there in the image. And I kind of feel like, what was the point of this? What were the
Well, you need to survey your subscribers and ask them for how many of them who have that feature, how many of them actually use the feature.
Okay.
I think some of that is, as I call it, it's a disease in search. It's a cure in search of a disease. That's what I call it. But on the other hand, it's a differentiating feature. Yeah. The engineers thought it was pretty cool. They knew that they could do it. They stuck it in, and then they find out whether the audience is using it or not. I don't find that kind of functionality to be entirely unwarranted. But it could end up being useless and something, when they find out that nobody uses it, they'll take it out.
Right. Well, and features that people don't use, and I can't explain why no one liked the Sony downloadable apps thing, but that's clearly in the dustbin of history. And I thought it was a pretty cool feature. I thought that was a good thing to do. They released the API so that third parties could develop apps. No one ever did. But I thought that was a good thing to do. But apparently consumers like you didn't feel. And let's have this discussion in the comments. What features in your camera really seem not worthwhile? And I was
That's a
say
great
post
idea.
focus is one, but I think that the pixel show. I mean, for me, these are my opinions. I'd like to hear from you now. But Paul, do you know the story of the road to Abilene?
No.
Okay, so a bunch of people are sitting on a porch in Texas. It's hot.
Sitting on a porch. Sitting on a porch. I'm just
sitting on a porch. Just relaxing on a porch. It's a hot day, and someone says, "Oh, I hear there's a new lemonade stand in Abilene. Why don't we get in the car and go?" Before you know it, everybody's in the car. It's hot. It's a 30-minute drive to Abilene. And everybody is saying to themselves, why are we doing this? It's hot. It's uncomfortable. How good can this lemonade be? Why didn't we just stay home? But the trouble was, no one bothered to check that everybody thought this was a good idea. One person says it, everybody goes along with it, but no one bothers to challenge the initial assertion. That's the road to Abilene story. How often does that happen, I think? That someone says something, someone thinks it's a good idea, or no one actually bothers to challenge whoever it is that brought that topic forward, that feature forward.
Well, you don't know until you don't know. What? Does that make sense?
Yes, of course. Yeah, it's the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns.
So, for instance, Apple just released its new Barbie iMacs, the multi-hued.
I love that description. You had a good bit actually on the new iMacs. I think that's worth watching. Too many SKUs.
Oh, thank you.
Think. Yes.
Too many SKUs, and the base SKU is bizarre. I'm not going to get into it here. Watch my video. I'm sure Martin will put a link to it in the description below.
Yeah, it's worth watching. But
I
again,
described there just how ridiculous the SKUs are, and to what point, and how much of it is buyer manipulation.
Right.
And then the other part is, does that manipulation actually work?
The entry-level one, the least expensive one, so they can put that $12.99 price point out, seems to be limited in several ways. That, first of all, it's the 8-7 thing.
Right.
Like,
8 core, 8 core CPU, 7 core GPU.
Well,
and for me, it's the cut down version
is that someone's going
chip.
onto the chip and snipping one little wire to disconnect? I don't know what that is.
Well, I mean, they bin the chips, and I'll bet you this was a dysfunctional, or is that what it's called?
Oh, chips that didn't pass muster. Oh, gosh.
Correct. And this is their way of selling them off. Well, I mean, it is what it is. Right?
Oh, gosh. Wow.
They're making use
and then
of,
only 2 ports, and then not having the little finger. You'd never buy one. You'd look at this and go, well, not getting what I want. I'm getting purple, though. I'm getting purple. That's.
They also give you fewer color choices on the low end.
That's true. Yeah, it feels like it's designed to not be worthwhile. But this is something.
It's a weird computer. That's another discussion. But Apple's
it's
manipulating the marketplace.
Right.
So that's either the educational SKU, or they're trying to manipulate you out of that, and they want you to pay the extra $200, which gives them more money. Watch my video.
Right. But let's
so this
talk
happens all the time. Everyone is doing that. Canon is doing it. Nikon is doing it. Maybe Nikon is doing it less now that they're becoming desperate in the marketplace. And maybe that's what's required to give consumers more value, is that companies have to be near to going under.
Well, or is it that they never expect you to buy the most expensive camera, or very few people are going to buy the most expensive camera. Very few people are going to buy the least expensive camera, and it's Swenson's had this, where the ice cream menu at Swenson's had something that was so outrageous. I think it was called the Earthquake. You got like 18 scoops for like $25. It was loaded. Like it would have taken a team of 6 people to get through the thing. But there it was on the menu for $25. And what it did was it made the $12, $16, $18 sundaes feel not so expensive. right? Because there was this other outrageous thing on the menu. So I think sometimes
it's true. We build websites. I mean, my business right now, my main business is building websites, and someone told us a long time ago is have 3 basic pricing models, because most people will pick the middle, and that's what happens.
Right. So
it's the mama bear. It's the mama bear strategy.
Right.
The 3 bear strategy.
Well, and then there are the accessories, right? Sometimes it feels as if an accessory is actually part of the product, that if you didn't buy the accessory, you didn't get the full benefit of it. You know, like it's the Fuji has a battery grip that includes a headphone port and enables 30-minute recording as opposed to 15 if you don't have it. That feels like, oh, that, you know, like I have to buy the battery grip. I can't, you know,
So was that an honest technical decision, or is that manipulation? Was that, were you restricted to 15 minutes specifically to encourage you to buy the grip? That's what you have to ask.
Yeah, and I think that was true for that model.
Okay.
It's the camera I'm shooting with, the XH1. You get 15 minutes unless you put the grip on, which, you know, makes no sense, because even if I don't put batteries in the grip and just external power it, you get 30 minutes. So it's,
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it hasn't, you know, it's not as if it's a heat sink and it's dissipating the heat. Anyway, that felt like just...
I think Fuji did that just so they could tell people, get a grip.
Yeah. You know, and Apple's just done it, just to continue our Apple conversation, with their little tile things. They're not tiles.
Right, the tags.
Things. Right, but there's no way to clip the thing onto anything. There's no way to attach it. You know, at least the tiles had that little thing where you could put a little belt clip or something onto it. But this,
they're just the right size. I'm going to be using them as a suppository so my wife can find me.
I don't know that she wants to know that. Where is Paul's? and then with the better iPhones, again, market segmentation, you have to have one of the newest iPhones to be able to, it'll tell you exactly how far away. So she's pointing it at your head, is going 1 foot away, is that?
Yeah, you have to have either the Model 11 or the Model 12.
Right.
But I mean, so what can you do? I bought the Model 5 Apple Watch, and it doesn't have the EKG. The Model 6 does. Do I throw it out just to get the EKG?
But the EKG doesn't work terribly well, isn't that?
Well, it's a one-stage EKG. Apparently it's saved an awful lot of people's lives. I don't know.
Okay, well,
just don't swallow the Apple Watch. If you swallow it, then it will kill you.
So I was a product manager in a previous lifetime. I have some understanding of trade-offs that are made when, you know, the features request list that I've created meets the development team, who tell you how long that's going to take to do, and then the marketing team, who want the thing ready to launch at Photokina. But do you think that a company would intentionally hold back a feature from Model A, so that when Model A Mark II comes along, they can fix the feature? Would that be a strategy anybody would even consider?
Yes, I think they would.
Wow.
Yeah, I think the companies either do it on purpose or know that they've released a product before it's fully baked, and they're going to have to do it regardless.
Because of Photokina.
Yeah. There's something called, I've developed products, and there's something called, what I call pencils down. At some point, you got to release it.
Right.
You have no choice. You can't just keep baking it.
But
the shareholders want their money.
But I think that's as you know, what used to be important launch events like Comdex or Photokina have less relevance in you know, in driving marketing cycles. Maybe those things will start to go away.
Old habits die hard.
That's
and then
true.
there's the whole issue too of the sales group disagrees with the marketing team.
Right.
The sales
they want a new
group
product to sell.
Yeah.
They've got to have something to get out there to energize that. Yep. That's true.
And some of the product features end up being BS. I remember when I was selling stereos that I won't name the company, but we found out that people bought big speakers. And so the perception was the bigger the speaker, the better the speaker. So they had an internal line. So we would sell them the Sansui unit almost at cost because the competition in the stereo business was so fierce. But then we would buy them an internally created speaker that was absolute garbage, but cost them pennies. But they were huge. They were huge. So people thought, wow, that big speaker, that's going to be way better than that acoustic reflex speaker, because it's not only cheaper, but it's bigger.
Big.
So there's the equivalent in the camera business. In every business, there's going to be that kind of sneaky stuff.
Right. Well, and I think that reviewers play a role in this too, and I'm going to call myself guilty on this because, sometimes there's an issue with a product, and I don't know whether we don't really realize it or it doesn't really annoy us enough that we include it in the review, but there's something about the product that we feel is not quite right, but we don't end up mentioning it until the next release. And when the next release comes out, all the reviewers suddenly admit that, this really bothered me about the previous model. How does that?
There's a bigger issue with reviewing in all technical fronts, and cameras, I think especially. I talked about this before, where let's say in your heart of hearts that no one out there needs anything more than a micro four thirds camera, that it will do everything that they will ever need for the rest of their lives. But people are not interested in micro four thirds anymore for whatever reason. Everyone is on to full frame. And to be able to advance your channel and to make money off your channel and to get more subscribers to your channel, you have no choice but to follow herd mentality.
To stop reviewing micro four thirds cameras.
Well, if no one is interested in it and everyone's interested only in full frame, then what do you do? Even though you feel as a professional that my 1-inch sensor camera is going to do them forever.
But does that happen at retail as well? Does a retailer, they feel, most of our consumers would be well served with, a micro four thirds camera, but no one comes in asking for them. So why am I stocking them?
There you go.
Right. Well, thanks for your time today. It's always fun.
My pleasure.
It's always fun chatting with you, and thank you for joining us. Paul's a funny and an insightful guy. Do check out his newly rebranded Peter Paul Chato channel. Did I get that right?
Well, it's rebranded back to the original brand.
Wow.
So is that
so
a
you've
rebrand?
Done a classic Coke thing here.
Yes. No one liked my shift, and I'm back to the original. People complained.
Oh, no one liked your shift.
No, they didn't like my shift. Okay. That's because I'm full of shift.
You're full of shift. Okay.
I'm full of shift.
My channel is non-sponsored. I don't have mid-roll ads, so I do appreciate the support of my members. And I'm also very thankful to those of you who subscribe. Please post your relevant and civil comments and questions. I read and reply to all. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Paul, always a pleasure to have you join me.
Be seeing you.
Thanks.